What's up? It is December 29th. It's a Sunday evening. I didn't do much driving between Friday and, the entire weekend. I don't think I drove anywhere. So I didn't get any videos done, and I figured I'd get one before the week starts. We're going to go over to Reddit, and the conversation is going to be about the post is titled "How to Convince the Company to Stop Hiring Interns." So I'm going to talk through this because I don't think it's quite as blatant as as the title makes it seem, which is good. We're going to look at some different angles of this, and yeah, I think this week I have definitely have Monday. Like tomorrow, I'll be going to CrossFit, so I might be able to get 4 videos done tomorrow, which will be good because Wednesday is off, right, for the new year. So I don't know if I'm gonna have much driving this week again. So try to get 4 done tomorrow. And just a reminder before I get into this one, if you have questions that you want answered, please leave them in the comments. I'm happy to go through and answer those. You can also look for Dev Leader on social media. Just message me on any platform. Provide as much detail as you want. It'll be totally anonymous. And then a reminder, because I am filming this on a Sunday night, I'm going to have it posted for tomorrow morning for your commute into work on my Dev Leader channel. I have a live stream every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific. It's topics just like this, except it's live, and it's an AMA format. So you're welcome to submit anything you want in the chat. And I would much rather spend the entire AMA just answering questions and stuff. So check that out on my main channel, Dev Leader, 7 p.m. Pacific. But okay, let's dive into it. So, how to convince the company to stop hiring interns. The context for this person's post is that they're saying they're at a startup, and it seems like from their perspective, the company that they're at is trying to hire interns to like save money. Like, hey, we need developers. We don't got a lot of money. If we just keep hiring interns, they're cheap. We'll get stuff done. Like it's kind of like a hack to try and get productivity or to get output. Is I think what this person's trying to say from their perspective. And as a software engineer, they're kind of feeling the friction with that. So it seems like small team. They have to ramp up interns. They ramp them up. The interns are gone after not a long period of time. So there's this like a lot of overhead with trying to get interns ramped up. And so I think it's interesting. They say kind of at the end of this, they said, I'm either forced to only give them crappy or useless work or to figure out a way to provide a hint that this is just wasting everyone's time and not leading to any benefit since we're limited on resources and investing time in transient members is not a very wise idea. Any thoughts? So you can kind of tell like they're frustrated by this. And I think just to call it out, I don't think that they're suggesting like interns are bad. I hate interns or anything like that. I think they're kind of feeling this pain of being at a small company, small team, um, and just, kind of like they're spending a lot of time with interns and they're not feeling like that's a good investment. So I wanted to talk about this from a few different angles. Before getting into too much of like opinion or whatever, I just want to give you a sort of high level disclaimer. Like in my career, especially before Microsoft, when I worked at Magnet Forensics, I think that I had interns every single month of the year for 8 years. I think. So a lot of places will do like I feel like this is more popular in the US in particular, but like summer internships, right? College, university students, they have their summers off. I lived and worked in a town called Waterloo, and I went to the University of Waterloo. There's a lot of like internship or co-op programs there, and they're not just in the summer. They rotate like every other semester. Um, and I'm not sure. I'm assuming other schools in Canada and stuff do this kind of thing too sometimes. But we had interns all the time. So and it was usually for 4 months. There was a college called Conestoga College. We had interns, I think, from 8, sometimes up to like 16 months at a time. But most common was like a 4 month placement. But I wanted to say this before getting into, sort of the meat of this conversation because I've spent a lot of my career working with interns. Even at Microsoft, we had interns. There was, 2 years ago? Time flies, man. I don't know. Might have been 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I had like 4 interns at Microsoft, and I wasn't even expecting to get any. Like we submitted projects and I thought I was doing it on behalf of like the larger org, and then I was the intern manager. So I was like, oh crap, what do I do? And they were in person, and I had only been like fully remote at Microsoft. So like it was a super interesting experience. But I have always worked with interns, and I want to say that I have had amazing interns, like mind blowing interns, and I've had interns where they were lackluster and it was challenging and it was a lot of work to kind of invest into them. So I have seen all different sides of this personally. Um, Now, in this case, okay, let's talk about this startup type of situation because when I was at Magnet Forensics, when I started there, it was a very small company. I think it was like 7 or 8 people in total, not just like the engineering team, but like in total. And there was already an intern working there. There were a couple of full time engineers, and there was at least one intern who had started before me. I don't know if they had someone else that had to get let go that was an intern or they were full time. But like the point is, like right from the beginning, there were interns, and we made. I should say this. I don't know if the founders' initial strategy was like, "Hey, interns are cheap. Let's get interns." Like that could have been their strategy initially. I actually do not know. But at least once I had started there, and once we were getting interns like regularly, I honestly feel like we took the time to invest into interns. I think the way that we looked at this was like we want to hire good people, and we know that we're going to need to have a mix of talent that's not just like senior, like the most experienced engineers in the world. We're going to need to have people with experience, and we're going to need to have people that are more junior, and we need to have like this, I call it like a pipeline of being able to build up teams. And this was like understood very early. This was something where we had access to these schools that had lots of students that were looking for internships. So like there was availability of this kind of thing. And I think for us, like I said, I don't know originally what, was kind of going through the founder, his mind, and like with the CEO's mind. Perhaps it could have been, hey, like we might have a good opportunity to get cheaper labor, perhaps. But that's not what it was in practice, at least, because we would have interns come on. I can remember managing interns, and it was like, hey, look, and I would talk to to my boss about this. I would talk to HR about this, but we wanted to make sure that number one, interns came on and they had a learning opportunity. Hands down, that's it. Like that is the number one thing. And often that would mean that even for some of them that were underperforming a little bit, it was like, yeah, that's a big tax on the team. And I'll talk about how we tried to minimize that, but like the goal was still like, we want to make sure that people came, they were able to have a learning opportunity. If they did awesome work, like obviously that's great. We really want that. But fundamentally, like they need to be learning. We want them to have a good time. We want to make sure that we want it to feel like a sales pitch to them, right? We want to be able to say like, look how awesome it was to work here. Look how much you learned. And if we're investing into you, we want you to be able to come back. Like it would be a really good sign for us if at the end of the internship they were like, hey, like I'm interested in being able to come back. What are the opportunities for that look like? Like that to us is a win. Of course, if you have someone that's underperforming or not meeting expectations, like we still want to make sure that they have that experience. We don't want people leaving and being like, hey, that company was crap to work for. They were lousy. They didn't care about me. Like we don't want that. We want people to either finish and want to come back, or they finish and they can at least speak highly of what it was like to work with us. Like that's kind of the framing. So we always invested a lot of time and effort into interns, but that doesn't mean that it was easy. Okay. So I would say like we got lucky in having a lot of really good interns. Um, but we also had situations where like you needed to do a lot more. I want to come up with a better phrase than like hand holding, but like we had a lot more guidance, a lot more hands on effort, right? Um, and I think in this person's case, they're kind of saying like they're not really seeing a lot of like the awesome interns. They're not seeing like we invest the time and it's worth it. So I'll talk about a couple of things that for us made it even better. Okay, so one was like if we could get interns to come back that were good, that really helped because it was like, okay, the next time they come back, there's going to be a little bit of ramp up, right? Because they're kind of getting refreshed after coming, like going to school, coming back. Things have changed. We're rapidly evolving as a fast growing startup, but it's not like they're learning from scratch, right? So their ramp up time compared to a brand new intern would be significantly faster. Okay, so that was one thing, was being able to have them come back. Number two was like if we had internship programs that we could participate in that allowed for longer internship periods, huge benefit. There's a risk, which is that if you had a intern that was underperforming, you now have them for longer. Doesn't mean like you could technically, fire interns or kind of terminate the internship. Um, I don't know. I don't think I ever had to do that. I think I had one situation in my entire career that might have been close. Um, and like as someone as a manager, like I kind of look at that and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm spending my time to try and turn this around as much as possible before I try to terminate the internship, because especially for interns, having something like that on their record can have like a really negative effect. And that's not to say that like it's okay to just like cause a negative impact to the company per se, but like I I look at this. I've talked about this in other videos. If like I want to make sure I'm putting in all my effort to coach and make sure I've done everything I possibly can before having to let go of someone, and especially if that's going to mean like kind of tarnishing their record, because it will make it extremely difficult for further internships if they were fired from an internship. Um, so I kind of look at it like, at least in my experience, if it was like 8 months or something, it's like, hey, look, like we'll try to get what like the most productivity we can out of these 8 months, and try to make it as good of an experience as possible and minimizing the impact to other people on the team. So longer time was very helpful. Coming back was very helpful. Um, I think something that like to avoid that was helpful was like project, like this is the kind of thing with interns that seem like a good fit for projects, or like, hey, if we put them onto something, so we came up with this project, it's like not a huge priority, so that means it's safer for the intern to do it. We'll get them to make as much progress as possible, and then like hopefully they land it, and then we have it from the for the end of their internship. One of the challenges with this kind of thing is that a lot of the time, because it's typical software engineering, the estimates are off. It doesn't get finished, and then you're left with something that's like 85, 90% done. The intern leaves and you're like, okay, what do we do with it? So we had situations like this where the projects didn't really kind of, they were supposed to fit within an internship and they really didn't. I found that a lot of the time that made like a bigger problem. So it was nice that the intern could work on that, they could focus on it, we could reduce the risk, but then we were kind of left with something that wasn't done, and we're like, okay, so we had 4 to 8 months of work. Usually the 8 month ones weren't such an issue like this, but the 4 months, it might not finish. So you have 4 months of work, nothing that's like a big project that's landed, and you're like, okay. So now you have to invest even more time and effort from some full time people. They have to maybe get more ramped up on it. Maybe at that point they're like, oops, we're checking out the code a little bit more. This has really got to get some more effort. There's a lot of things that you can do to try and make this better throughout the entire internship. But the point is that finding small projects like this, I find if they're not getting landed, like it creates more work. So um, I like having interns come on and deliver stuff that is going to have some continuity, if that makes sense. So being able to participate in a larger project and take some responsibility over part of it, I think is helpful. But trying to confine the entire internship to like a dedicated standalone thing feels kind of crappy. We had at one point at Magnet, we had interns building our first build system, which in hindsight, I'm like, every time I tell this story, I'm like, why did we do this? I know, like, I understand why we did it. We thought it was important, but not important enough to actually take full time people to dedicate to building it. That's the reality of it. And in hindsight, like, this is the thing with hindsight, right? Like, after spending 8 years there, like once we've had an actual good build system, we were like, oh my god, we should have done this so much sooner. But with the interns, what was happening was they were coming on and they couldn't finish the entire build system in 4 months to go put something together. And they get most of the way there. They were getting some builds output, but then what was happening was because we had interns sort of all the time, was we would have interns come on the next period. So we'd have someone full time trying to bridge the gap between the interns on this build system. So you'd have a period at the end that's like making sure the full time person's ramped up and understands it. Then you'd have this next period when the next intern starts, they're trying to ramp up. And it was like, it was so ineffective because there was like, I shouldn't say no continuity, minimal continuity. If, in my opinion, if we would have had someone full time working on this and then augmented their efforts with interns, I think that would have been more helpful. But it truly felt like just enough effort from a full time person to like tell the next intern coming on what they're going to be working on. Um, yeah, just like challenging. So a recommendation I would have is like really think about continuity with projects, or else you end up having a lot of good work done but potentially not landed. Another thing that you can do, and I mean this is just good software engineering practice in general, is like when you're having any developer, but in this case we're talking about interns, like try to break up the deliverables so that they have something they can land, right? So it's tricky depending on what projects you're giving interns, but that's why I'm trying to say like kind of frame it this way. If you're able to have them land something like periodically throughout the time, and I don't just mean oh their code is landed but like it doesn't work. Like truly try to break things up into like an MVP or like just different components that they can land, and that way things are usable throughout the period. Just helps kind of de-risk things. But what I'm explaining right now is like if you're just familiar with trying to decompose deliverables into smaller pieces, same idea. But keep that in mind for internships. I think it's really helpful. Um, so those are some ideas. Something else I wanted to mention regarding what this person's talking about, because this is a different angle here, is like they're saying, how do I, like, what do I do here? Because clearly they're having interns come on. This person's feeling like there's a lot of time invested. By the way, let me talk about this one thing before I pivot. In terms of like, I wanted to say like minimizing impact of like challenging interns and stuff. At least how I would structure interns coming on is I like to make sure that I have someone on my team that I'm able to make the intern buddy. Pardon me. So it's a really good like informal leadership opportunity. Pair someone up to give them ability to mentor, coach, guide people through. Um, I find that for really junior people, not a good recipe because they're trying to figure shit out for themselves. But for someone that's kind of mid-level to senior, I think it's a really good opportunity. At the like the principal and higher level, I not that it's not like worth their time and effort. It feels like a bit of a distraction because these individuals are able to get the mentorship and coaching opportunities with the senior people on the team, right? So I like kind of looking at mid to senior. If you have really strong juniors, that could be a good opportunity too. But I would say those people are probably on the cusp of being mid level anyway. So something to think about. When you do this, I think, like I said, it's good for coaching opportunities, some different career growth. But I need to make sure that I'm in tune with the intern buddy, because if they're like, hey, like things are pretty challenging, I need to make sure that I'm not having them be so distracted, right? Because they're like, look, like I got to do, like, I have to spend so much time with this person and the output's not very much. That's where I might need to step in. And this is sort of my own like leadership style, I guess. When I talk about managing teams, my ultimate goal is to make sure my team can do their best work possible. And I also need to make sure that they can grow in their careers. And I need to align things to business. But that first part, enabling my team to do their best work possible, priority number one for me. That means if they're getting really distracted with an intern and that's bleeding over into some of their other work, like they're like, I can't get my shit done. I'm very focused on this. I just want to do a good job with it, but it's so demanding. I will step in as much as needed. That means if they need more one-on-one time with the intern, let me step in and do that. Is it a great use of my time? I don't know, but I want to make sure that I'm enabling my team to do their best work possible. So for me, this is kind of like I think from some startup times, right? But if that means I need to do carve out a little bit more time for my schedule, I'm going to do it. Is it something I'm super stoked about? Not necessarily, but I want to make sure that I can help the people on my team, and if we can try to turn this around together to make it a productive, educational experience for the intern, then I want to do that. So it's challenging, but what I'm trying to call out here is that to minimize impact on my team, I will try to step in. Um, like I said, it's been pretty rare that a conversation of termination for an intern comes up, in my experience. Um, but that's something that if I were talking with the intern buddy, I would want to make sure that if that was like, hey, we've been trying everything, I've been stepping in to help, and there's like still like another 4 months or something. If it's like, hey, if it's not working, like we should have a conversation. But something to think about. So the other angle, sorry for the back and forth here. The other angle here is this person saying like, how do I tell management leadership like this is not a good strategy? And on like this is obviously going to depend on kind of like your own personal investment into the company. Like, are you just doing this because you want to be there and you got a paycheck? Hopefully not. I feel like that's kind of a crappy way to go throughout your career. So hopefully it's not that. If you are invested into the company, you enjoy it. What's your working relationship like with leadership? Whether that's, in my case, it was like the CEO and the founder, which was the CTO. Like I felt like I could have a conversation with them about anything. So if I needed to in this case, so I was like, if I were in this situation where I was working, I would go have a conversation and be like, hey, look, what I'm observing is that we're bringing on these interns. I think it's a great opportunity for teaching people, having a good pipeline of potential people to come through. But the overhead that we're experiencing with the constant churn, just from the 4 month period, it's not really a good fit given the maturity or the size of our teams. So, what are some options? Well, we have one of the teams that's much bigger and they have more senior people on it. Maybe we could look at having interns only for that team. So let's reduce the overall number of interns. Okay. That's one option. Option number two might be, hey, look, like same kind of argument going on here. But because of the overhead, like maybe we should consider only getting interns that are 8 months long. Or maybe we have enough teams and enough variety where we can say, hey, for the 8 month interns, let's put them on. The smaller team can probably take that on. And the larger team could probably take on the 4 month interns. The number of interns that we can support, this is a conversation that actually did come up a lot. The number of interns we could support. And there were different points in where I was working before at Magnet where the life cycle, if you can call it that, of the company, like the growth trajectory, what was going on, there were different phases where I felt like we could support more or less. There were times where, I would say like, based on what's coming up for us and how things have been going, it's going to be challenging for us to take on an intern. So we need to make sure that if we're bringing on an intern, if there's a handful that we're looking at to hire, maybe we're going to bring on 5 interns across all of our teams. Like we don't have capacity for someone that's very junior. So if they're like a first year student, like we might not have capacity this time around, but we could take on someone more senior. And that might change, right? That might different phases. We might say, hey, look, we actually have solid group of people on the core team. Like we can take on someone more junior because we have a few senior people that can support that. So what I would recommend to this person is like, number one, think about your sort of working relationship with leadership. If you find that that's already awkward, like you can't have a conversation about that. I don't know the reporting structure based on this Reddit article. So something for you to think about is like, is that a conversation that you need to have with your own manager, depending on how many levels there are, to say, this is what I'm experiencing. Maybe your manager can help, represent that perspective up through leadership and executives, perhaps. Maybe this is something you can actually get some perspective from the other engineers, depending on how big the company is and how many interns come on. What's their experience been like? Maybe there's something you can learn from them about making this better. Or perhaps they're going through the same thing, and then you can kind of collect that information again, bring that to your manager, bring that to leadership, and say, hey, look, like this is kind of like a theme that's been going on. Um, and this might kind of sound obvious, but what I probably wouldn't do is just go right into like the financials of it and say like, you guys are being dumb here. You're bringing on people. You're just trying to cut corners and save money. Like I, I don't feel like that's a productive way to do it. So I would talk about the impact that it's having on the team, right? If and again, like if their goal is to say we want to make sure like we are trying to hire interns because it's cost effective from our perspective. If that's their philosophy, I'm not here to say that's right or wrong. If that's their philosophy, then I would share the data back with them about the effectiveness of it. Okay, so you bring on an intern for 4 months, but we're spending, I'm just making this up, we're spending 2 months ramping them up, and the last 2 weeks or last half a month is like they're kind of winding down to be able to present their internship project or get something ready for school for it. So we really get like a month and a half worth of work, of productive work, if we get a good intern. Again, I'm just making these numbers up, right? But if you can go through that thought process and say, okay, so you're paying this intern at a discounted rate, you might be, again, maybe you don't have to go into all the details, but to be able to kind of, I don't know, like put some perspective together around this, it's like, just so you're aware, here's the amount of effectiveness we get out of an intern in the current way that we're operating. Maybe that's a good data point for them to go, oh, crap, like maybe that actually isn't so effective because we do this 3 times a year. If every intern is, again, just making this up, 2 months of ramp up time before they're effective, that's 6 months. That's half the time completely gone. Maybe it isn't so good, right? So I want what I'm suggesting is like bring the perspective and the impact that it's having. If you have some ideas for solutions to try and make those things better, I think that's great. But ultimately, like the people that are running the business are going to be making final decisions on this. So, um, trying to, this is just my opinion on it, trying to interject to say, like, no, this is how you have to do it. I just don't think that's helpful. But providing the perspective about what's actually happening, I think that that can be very valuable. Um, that's sort of a that last statement is kind of a general thing that I had experienced while working at Magnet, which was a startup that grew to a mid-sized company, like a few hundred people. Was that throughout my tenure there, because I was there as the company was growing, I had a lot of autonomy, and there was a lot of trust that was put in me to be able to try and navigate things right. So if I had feedback, I wouldn't go into conversations with like the VP of engineering or the CTO and just be like, look, man, like you got to change this stuff around. This is garbage. Like we're losing money on like, nope. It would just be like, hey, like want to sit down and talk. Like I think noticing some challenges or noticing some inefficiencies that I just want to talk through and just present my observations. Like I said, if I have solutions to go along with that, that could be helpful. And those might be things we try, right? But I want to give the information to the people that are making the final decisions. And the other point that I mentioned was like, if you can collect data from others going through this, I think that's helpful, either for you to learn from or for you to kind of supplement some of the perspective that you want to share. So, with all that said, I've had an amazing time working with interns in my entire career, whether that was while I was a technical manager, so being an individual contributor and a manager, and having interns with us, or at Microsoft where I'm a full time manager, like I don't have any individual contributions, and trying to lead teams with interns on them. So um, I don't think the answer, it depends on the company. I don't think the answer universally is just get rid of interns, but I do think that there are situations where having interns can be very ineffective. And I think that there are situations where having interns can be a huge uh, boon, if you will, to the team and what they create. So, yeah, I think like anything in software engineering, it depends. So have a conversation about it, and I hope that anyone who's going through that kind of experience with interns and stuff, like yeah, have a conversation about it, and I hope that that works out well for you. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.